In this lesson, we're going to learn about Jinja 2 form macros and how to use them to refactor your code and create reusable form components. So let's get started. In our previous lesson, we added our form to our index.html template. And if you remember correctly, once I created one field, I took that field and I copy and pasted it down to create the send on field. So I created the message and then the send on field, but I was able to copy and paste. When you're able to do that, when you're able to copy and paste your code and only change one or two minor things, that's a good indicator that it requires some refactoring and that you can condense that logic into a reusable function or component. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to take this form rendering logic and we're going to abstract it into a Jinja macro, which we're going to then use to output our form and render it within our templates. So first, let's create a new file. In our templates folder, we're going to create a file. We're going to call it form_macros.html. So this is where we're going to house our form macros. So the way that we're going to structure this is that we're going to have one macro that renders our form, and then we're going to have individual macros for the different types of form fields. So first, let's stub out our macros just like we would stub out functions, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it's going to work, and then we'll put them together. So first we'll create our form rendering macro. We'll create some functional tags, and the format is you go macro, and then you have a macro name. So it's just like defining a function. So we'll go macro render underscore form, and like most functions, you can add parameters. So it's going to take a form, it's going to take a method, it's going to default to post, and it's going to take an action, and it's going to default to empty. Okay. So let's close up this macro. So you go end macro, just like you would end any tag in Jinja. Next, we want to create our field macros. So we know we have three types of fields, right? We have a message field, which is a string field. We have a DateTime field, which is, or rather the send on field, which is a DateTime field. And then we have a submit field. So let's create one for our string field. Let's go open up our tags, macro. So we'll go render string field, and that's going to take a form field parameter. We'll close that up, and macro. And then we'll create our submit field. Let's go macro, render submit field. It's going to take a field object for our parameter. Same as the other one. We'll go end macro. And then we're going to create one more for our DateTime field. So we'll go macro render DateTime field. And macro. Okay, there we go. So we have our render form. And within that render form, depending on the field type, we're going to render either a string field, a submit field, or a DateTime field. So let's start plugging the logic for our render form macro. So first off, we know that we want to output a form, so we're going to create a form element. The method is going to be equal to a Jinja variable output for the parameter method. And the action is going to be equal to the same thing, but for action. Then we'll close up our form tags. There we go. So what we've done here is we've created our form element, and we're just passing in configurable parameters for method and action, so that if we are creating a form and we want to change the method or the action, we can just change it within these parameters. So next we need to iterate over our form fields, and to do that we're going to use the Jinja for function. So we'll open up some Jinja tags, and now we want to go for field in form, and this will treat the form just like a list, and we'll iterate it over it. So let's go here, we'll close up this loop. And now for each iteration of the loop for each form field, we want to wrap it in a div. This will give it some structure, so we'll go form group, and this is just a bootstrap class, which will give it a little bit of style. Now within our containing div, we want to output our field, But first we need to determine which of the macros that we're going to use to render the field. And to do that, we need to check the type. So what we'll do is we'll do a conditional check here. So let's open up some template tags. And then we'll go if field type is equal to, and let's start with the submit field. So we'll go submit field. And then we'll go down a couple lines. We'll open up some more tags. And we're going to do an else if statement to check if the field type is a DateTime field. There we go. And then we'll just copy that. And we'll check for string field. There we go. And then we just need to close up our if statement. So end if. Okay, there we go. So now we can render our form fields. So we'll go up to the submit field, and we'll use the appropriate tags. There we go. And then we want to call our render submit field function, or macro rather, and we'll pass it the field. So this will render out the submit, or rather it'll render out the field if it's a submit field. So then we'll just copy that, and we're going to put it down here and one down here, and then we'll just change this. We'll change it to the DateTime, and then we'll change this one to string. So there we go. Last but not least, for our form method, or our form macro rather, we're going to add some error handling. So what we'll do is we'll open up some template tags, and now we want to iterate over the errors. So we'll go for error in field errors, and then we'll close up the for tag and for. And now we're going to output, for each error we'll output, let's wrap it in a div, and then we'll go error, and we'll close up that div. Okay, so we have our form macro, our render form macro complete. We iterate over all the form fields within a form element, and we output those based on the type of field that it is. And then we're also adding some error handling so that if there's any errors for each of the fields, it'll output each of the errors in its own div. So now we can start filling in our macros. Let's start with our RenderString macro. So let's go down, we'll open some conditional tags, or rather some template tags, and then we want to go set class underscore is equal to, and we want to set it to form control. So then we'll go down a line, and we want to check and see if there's any errors for the field. So we'll go if field errors, we'll close that up. And then we want to, if there's an error, we want to add an additional class. So we'll go set class equal to class underscore plus is dash invalid. So what we've done here is we've used Jinja to set a variable called class underscore, and we've set that to a string equal to form dash control. Now within this arrow check, we're appending an additional class is dash invalid to the class variable. So it'll look like form dash control space is dash invalid. And what that's going to do is it's going to give the input styles for the class form control, and then if there's an error, it's going to give the input styles for an invalid state, which is going to be handled by Bootstrap. So next, let's output our label. Actually, we don't want to do that within there. There we go. So we want to open up some label tags, and then within our label tags, we're going to output our form label. So we'll go here, open up some more tags, and then we'll go field.label. And then under that is where we're going to output our field. So we'll go down a line, and then we want to output it like this, but we want to add our additional class. So we'll call it like you would a function, and then we'll go class underscore is equal to class underscore, and that'll pass our custom set class variable. So next we'll do our submit field. So we'll go down, and this one's going to be a little bit easier. We still have to add, we can still use our class variable, but we're not going to be adding any type of error checking for it because it's a submit field, and we don't actually care if it has any type of errors because that's probably not going to happen. So let's go button dash primary, and then let's output the field. pass in the class equal to class underscore. Okay, I think that looks good. Hit save. So what I've done is, again, we've set this this variable. Oops, actually I didn't do set, did I? There we go. Okay, so we've set this class variable, or class underscore variable, equal to these classes, or this string of classes rather. So form control, which is, again is just adding some styles from Bootstrap, and these are additional Bootstrap classes as well, and that'll just kind of style up the submit button to make it look better. So that's good for the submit field. Lastly, let's do our DateTime field. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy here and paste it over, and then indent it, and then we're just going to add one more class. We'll add DateTime Picker, which is, if you remember, it's the class that we're using in our jQuery selector to assign the DateTime Picker plugin. So we're going to make sure that we have that class so that it assigns it to the field. Now you'll remember me saying if you can copy and paste your code, that means it's refactorable. That's definitely the case here, and I think that there's some room to refactor, especially within the rendering macros. You could potentially move away from using macros altogether for the separate renders, but I definitely think there's some room for improvement here, and feel free to refactor as you see fit. Now this all looks good. I think our macros are ready, so what we'll do is we'll switch over to our index file, and then we're going to import these macros, and then we're going to use them within our index file to output our form. So let's go to the top of our index file. We'll go down one line. What we're going to do is we're just going to import our render form macro. So let's go from form underscore macros.html. There we go. Import render underscore form. And you'll notice this looks exactly like Python because essentially it is Python. Okay, so now that we have our render form imported, we can use it to output our actual form. So let's get rid of all the old form markup, and let's see here, where does it all start? So this is the form, so let's go all the way down and we can get rid of that, just like that. And now we can just open up some tags and go render underscore form, and then we just want to pass in the form object, and then we'll hit save. Okay, so let's switch over to our Chrome, and then we want to hit refresh. And there you can see some changes right away. It's styled much better. You can see like the button, obviously the button Bootstrap styles took, and so did the field styles. It's just looking much cleaner. You can see the labels are printing out nicely, and you can also see that our DateTime Picker is working as expected. So it seems like our macros worked. Lastly, let's test the errors and make sure that they're working as well. So to do that, just like before, we'll just add some bad data. So let's we'll just put in some gibberish, and then we'll paste that a bunch of times so that it's definitely 140 plus, and then we'll just I guess we'll leave that blank for the required error. So we'll submit. So looks like maybe we didn't get 140 characters. There we go. Okay. So you can see our form errors are showing up. They don't look overly great though. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to switch over to our code, and we're going to add another Bootstrap class to make those errors look a little bit better. So let's go over to our editor, and in our form macros HTML file, we're going to go down to our errors div here where we're outputting our errors, and we're going to add a class. So let's go class, and we're going to add a Bootstrap class that'll add a little bit of error styling for us. So let's add the class invalid dash feedback. Okay, there we go. And we'll save that. We'll switch back over to Chrome, and let's refresh here, and then we'll make some errors. Let's go create. Okay, cool. So you can see the error messages are actually read now and actually look like error messages, which will stand out much better. Yeah, that looks good. It looks like it looks very understandable. It's very obvious that each field is erroring, and Bootstrap's doing its thing. So last but not least, let's create an actual reminder to check that our fields are passing the data appropriately. So let's go, I don't know, let's see here. got groceries, we got Christmas gifts. Let's go. Don't forget your Easter eggs. There we go. And we'll just set that to whenever, 5 o'clock. There we go. And hit create. Okay, cool. Looks like it's working. So that's it for our macros. It seems to be working functionally. It seems to be visually coming together really well. And I think that, as you could see in the code, once you moved all that form logic into the macro, the actual index template itself was much cleaner. So like always, let's switch over to our shell, and let's make a git commit for our progress. So we'll go git status. We changed our index template and we added our form macros template. So that makes sense. So we can go ahead and go git add dot to add all those, and we'll double check that they're staged. Looks like that's good. And then we'll make our git commit with our message, and we'll just say refactored reminder form into template macros. There we go. So that's it for this lesson. We did some good refactoring. We moved all of our form rendering logic into a reusable macro, so we can render forms in other templates now as well using the same logic, and we don't have to recreate that markup and then that template code every time. Next lesson, we're going to be creating a delete view that we can use to delete our reminders.